So a number of years ago, one of my favorite coaches in the world, Les Rabinovich, I call him my Yoda of coaching, introduced me to someone that he knew could help my clients basically maximize their talent, hire the right people, keep the right people, develop the right people. And I have worked with Elizabeth on a number of clients since then, always very successfully. So I wanted to introduce her to you. I know she's got a lot of value to add. Elizabeth Lynch has a bachelor's in psychology from Miami University and an executive MBA from Case Western Reserve Weatherhead School of Management. They need to shorten that name. That's too. She's focused her career in leadership development and strategic planning. Prior to creating Engaged Leadership Consulting, she was VP of Leadership Development for one of Northeast Ohio's fastest growing companies. Through her tenure, she helped lead company strategic planning, manager and employee development, and employee engagement. She's also a certified accountability, strategy, and assessment coach from Master Coach University and has been helping executives succeed for over a decade. Like I said, she's done a great job helping my clients. Today, we're going to focus on her work helping clients find, keep, and develop great talent. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, thanks for doing the show. Hey, I want to dive right into a phrase that I hear today, and people think it's new, and I want to get your sense of it because I'm not sure how new it is, but we hear a lot for the war for talent and how hard it is today when the economy today is shifting things back a little bit, but how hard it is to find and keep good people and all that. Is that war for talent, Elizabeth? Is it something new? And if it is, let's talk about why it's new. If it's not, is it not new, but is it somehow different today?
It's definitely not new for as long as I've been doing this, which is, I hate to admit, over 20 years. There's always been a war for talent, no matter what's going on in the world. And think the phrase should be redefined to a war for great talent. There's always
Oh,
someone looking for a job, but we want to make sure we bring the right talent and great talent into the organizations. And that's what's always hard to find. I think what causes it has changed a lot over the years, whether it's recessions, whether it's pandemics. But the people who are phenomenal, who are going to be great leaders, who are driven to succeed, they don't need a job. They have a job. And so, how do companies find those great people, identify that they're great, and recruit them over to the organization? That's where the war happens.
I love that. I love that. So there's not a war for mediocre talent, but there's a war for great talent. And there's
Yes.
always been a war for great talent. There probably will
100%.
always be a war for great talent. So I love
100%.
that. So I know in the work that we've done together, it very much focuses, at least a big part of the focus has been on this top grading methodology, which I know is something you've got incredible expertise in. And we don't have to stick just to that
Mhm.
methodology, but it is something I recommend to all my clients.
Mhm.
But tell us a little bit more about when you talk about that war for great talent
Mhm.
and finding the right people. Give us a sense of some of the most important techniques to do that, and then we'll kind of drill in, but focus on this top grading methodology as well, which I know is so important.
Absolutely. So, top grading is vital, and everything I say is grounded in the top grading methodology, which I can talk to in a bit. But really, about finding great talent, it starts with defining what good looks like. And so frequently, that is the step that is missed. I need a great COO. People kind of assume what that is. They go out and look for it. They have an interview and say, yeah, this person seems nice. Think I can get along with them. I can have a beer with them. They hire them. They jumped a lot of steps in the process. There needs to be a lot of thought on what good looks like. And in top grading, we translate that into scorecard. What are the key performance indicators that they're going to be measured to drive performance of the company? What are the core values of the organization? That's the DNA that everyone has. And what are the competence that that individual needs to have to be great at their role? So that is the foundation to driving what great looks like. And then as you leverage top grading, if you have this foundation of a scorecard and a blueprint, you can do interviews and internally or externally and score them against this blueprint foundation to actually use data to drive your hiring decisions.
So I love that. Let's drill in a little bit to this
Okay.
idea of a job scorecard
Yeah.
because I believe that's so important and I rarely see it done well.
Mhm.
Unless I bring you in to work with them, I rarely see it done well. Talk a little bit when people hear job scorecard, they might say, well, I have job descriptions. Talk to us a little bit about how it's different.
A job description is a marketing tool. It is what you put out there on your website, on your job boards to attract the right people. We need you to have a bachelor's degree in this, we need to have 10 years with SAP, whatever it might be. It's truly a marketing tool to try to get the right people in, but it's not a tool to measure if they're able to do it. A scorecard gets more specific. It's what exactly are the KPIs, like I said, that they have to reduce. And not only do they have to reduce it, but have they done it in the past? So it's very specific of what are we looking for them to achieve and what behaviors do they need to have and do really well at to show up. So a scorecard is drastically different from a job description because it's really diving into very detailed basis of the exact criteria. And when I say criteria, again, it's not going to be 10 years in the technical field, that kind of stuff. It's going to be do are they an A performer of strategy? And if they are, what does A looks like? It's that they've implemented strategic plans in their organization, that they follow a methodology like scaling up, that they have a high success rate of creating a BHAG, a 3-year plan, a 1-year plan, quarterly priorities, and then executing with success to those priorities, 90 to 100% of the time. It's that type of thing. And so then when you're interviewing them, you can say, hey, they've done this. Hey, they are an A because they're hitting these criteria on strategy, because they're hitting these criteria on leadership, and score them to that.
I know for my clients, one of the areas of that scorecard that they struggle with the most are the KPIs, the key
Mhm.
performance indicators. And my thought is it's not the only difference between a job scorecard and a job description.
Right.
But to me, that's such a critical difference that you never
Sure.
see on a job description. So give us an example and let's pick something that's typically not measured very well, like a sales is one that's pretty easy to
Sales
measure,
is
right?
one.
It's like, oh, are they hitting their revenue goals? But if you talk about like a VP of marketing
Yeah.
or a head of talent,
Yeah.
pick one or both of those and just pick one of those,
Yeah.
whichever you want. But give us an example of what the KPIs might look like. And is
Yeah.
it two really important KPIs that never change? Is it 25 of them that are changing every month or every quarter? Give us a clearer sense of that.
So I'm gonna pick head of talent only because I could argue that marketing you can get very specific and measurable. So you can if you can't get to black and whites of marketing, I would challenge that. But head of talent is always one that's very difficult because how do we measure if you're doing it well? So any good KPI, as you know, needs to be smart, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic timeframe. KPI should be measured monthly, but the KPI should be consistent throughout the year. Scorecards are living, breathing, fluid models. They're going to change as the business changes, but they shouldn't be changing on a monthly basis. You should have kind of the standard KPIs for that year unless something drastic in the business changes. So for head of business or head of talent, the KPIs that we see is first of all, talent is responsible for employee morale, employee engagement. We'd want to have engagement data there. So it would be something like an employee NPS score, employee satisfaction score as one of the KPIs. But then that's something you're not going to measure monthly. You might not even measure that quarterly. So then how else do you measure that? We can put successful completion to goals around there as well. So I would want a head of talent to create a quarterly strategy to drive employee engagement aligned with the corporate strategy. Have that strategy approved by their manager, who's like the CEO, which means it's the right strategy, and then execute 100% of that strategy. So the creation and the execution to their quarterly priority would be um, a metric. If we get to the next type of KPI you'd have for a head of talent, it would be what's the skill set of talent? And I call that talent density. People define talent density in a lot of different ways, but we're going to call it percentage of A performers. and percentage of C performers. You want a high percent of A performers, and really you want 0 C performers. And if someone's a C performer, they need to be up or out in a quarter. So the head of talent should be managing of our team. We've got 80% A performers, need 15% B performers, and 5% C performers that we have an action plan to, and they should be talking to those numbers monthly. Those would be the types of KPIs. But again, it has to be specific, something they can measure, and something they can take action on that's impactful to the organization.
I love that. I love that. And by the way, I've stolen that term talent density probably from you. And the calculation I have is
Mhm.
I actually do percent A players minus what
I
I
know.
call percent C and toxic C.
Yeah.
And you get either anywhere from negative 100% to
Yeah.
positive 100%. And it's a wonderful benchmark.
That's a
So I love
fantastic
that.
calculation. That's the one I recommend, but it can be a little overwhelming. So I always say, let's just focus on A's and C's first and get rid of them and move from there.
I love that. I love that. So I do want to come back to this idea of having a head of talent
Mhm.
around. I know we're just using it as an example and talking about
Right.
job scorecards, but I think that's such an important role. So I'm going to put a pin in that
Okay.
and come back to it because I want to talk about some more techniques. So job scorecard, really important when it comes to going out, knowing what you're looking for when you're out finding your next leader or your next mid manager or whoever it is. Also important in evaluating the performance of somebody already on the job. So, job
Absolutely.
scorecard is great. What's another tool or technique that you've used successfully to find and keep, to basically to maximize your talent density?
There's You have to approach talent density in so many different ways. So to me, a scorecard's the foundation. Do I know what I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to be an A performer? Am I being measured to that? Having the coaching conversations. But then we have to have an engaging environment with strong leaders who are retaining people, right? We got to focus on retention. It doesn't matter how many great people you can find if you're gonna lose them in a few months, right? So there needs to be a lot of emphasis and focus around retention. And one size fits all doesn't work in retention anymore. It's no longer about having the ping pong tables or guaranteeing that they can be remote some of the time. It's about understanding what our employees need on a personal level. What motivates them? Why are they there? What's their dream at the end of the day? And making sure you can work on that individual level to give them that fulfilling workplace, because that's what a lot of people are looking for now is a fulfilling workplace in my life, and what my fulfillment is likely different than your fulfillment. So we've got to be focusing on retention. We've got to be a great company that people talk about too. Glassdoor is the bane of my existence in the HR world, but we want to make sure that we have a company that people are happy and people are growing so they become marketers to the company, right? They're at parties saying about how happy they are because they are happy. It's a great place to work. Their titles changing on LinkedIn from, a specialist to a manager to eventually a director. People take notice of that, and that's attracting top talent. So it's really has to start in-house to attract and keep your people.
So let's talk about that retention piece a little bit from with a very specific focus
Mhm.
of, we know that yes, people work for companies, but people really work for their managers. And people leave when they leave, they don't leave a company, they leave their manager. When they
100%.
stay, it's because they've got a great manager or leader. So let's talk a little bit about that because you and I have both seen that, organizations promote people, whether it's from a super worker to a supervisor
Mhm.
or from a supervisor to a true leadership position, maybe around that executive table. And they do that typically because they're great at the technical aspects of what they do. So they get promoted. Talk a little bit about what that causes, the importance of those leadership skills. And I want to dive into this
Yeah.
one because this is one that is so important and so neglected.
Absolutely. I'm glad you bring it up. So if I think of the biggest mistakes at companies, number one is hiring the wrong people. And number two is what they do when they promote people. What is so common is you take that superstar individual contributor, you promote them and say, congratulations, now you're a manager. These are the people you're responsible for. See you later. And then they're left to figure it out. And they're all figuring it out by themselves. They have different management rhythms. They don't know how to be a manager. They've never been taught how to be a manager. And as a result, their team frequently suffers. It is vitally important when anyone is promoted, they get that proper training and that proper criteria on what's expected of them to be a manager. I do a training for people that just became a manager that's management 101, and it seems so basic and yet it's so fundamental. It's things like you're now in a fishbowl. Everything you do is seen as what an employee is supposed to do to succeed. So if you're negative, if you're late, any of those things, you're telling your team that you can be. And that's something so foundational that you think it's common sense, but it's not. Managers need to be taught this. They're in a new world and they really need that skill set to be taught what the expectations are. They need to be taught how to have the hard conversations. They're going to be lucky if they're handed a team of A performers, but they've got to keep those A performers engaged and at the company. So how do you work with A performers? How do you create it so that you understand what their motivation is? You give them jobs and projects so they can grow, and you create a growth path in front of them and advocate for them. And then what do you do with those underperformers? Because that takes too much time that should for managers. That could be a liability of the company, et cetera. There are so many new skills a manager needs to have, and they're not given. And as a result, their team suffers, their retention suffers, there becomes cancer in the company, or their team just drifts by underperforming without the right accountability because they don't have those skills. Because people assume, oh, you were great at this, you're going to be good at this, without ever that clear communication and training.
So let's drill into how you
Yeah.
do that, because I will tell you, I spent the first half of my 35 plus year career. So you said, oh my God, 20 years. I've got 35. So you're a kid. But I spent half of my career as a management consultant working for very large consulting companies that only work with $1 billion companies. And I can remember when I was at a company that's now called Accenture, but when I
Mhm,
worked with them, they were still called Arthur Anderson. When
mhm,
I made manager, it was a big deal.
mhm.
And we went, I forget what it, we went away for 2
Yep.
weeks to do management training, and it
Yeah.
was wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, that's because that was a $1 billion plus company that has the money to go do that kind of thing. Most folks listening to this, most of my clients can't afford to say, first off, they don't have 50 people making new manager, in a quarter. So let's
Right.
all go to a beautiful place and do it. They may promote one or two people every year or every 6 months. So how do we get real and say, okay, maybe is it we got to send people away for 2 weeks of intense leadership training? What does it look like? Because I've seen too many organizations screw it up and spend all their time planning, and then they execute on a horrible program. Like, what are some options? What might it
Yeah,
look?
and you're right. It really does become dependent on the size of the company, the finances of the company. If you can send them away to a university to train them to be a manager and you have that money, fantastic. But a lot of times we're not in that situation. We're running too fast to do it. Again, the foundation's going to start with a scorecard. So what do we expect of you as a manager? And that piece is missed a lot. So we can at least be very crystal clear. We expect talent density, right? You've got to manage your team. You've got to make the right hiring decisions. We expect leadership. You're a role model to the organization. Everything you do is in a positive manner. You are a servant leader. You are building people up. What are those expectations of managers is first, because then they can see for themselves, I have a gap. What do I need to do? Can you help me with this? I've never had a conversation with underperformers. What do I need to do? So that's the foundation. Is just that they know that their life is different and here's the new expectations for them. And then there's phenomenal resources out there. There's people like myself who come in and help train managers, and mid-level management training is something I've really worked hard on building because I found it such a deficit in organizations. There's fantastic business books, there's fantastic trainings out there to help drive them. But the key is for them to first know that it's a new game, that they're expected to be a different type of person so that we can identify where those weaknesses are and help on that individual level. And then as you get larger leadership teams, you can bring the whole leadership team through trainings, either bring an expert in or record it so it's scalable. So that every time you promote a new manager, they can watch the recording. I love doing that. Like if you're going to pay for something, You shouldn't have to pay for it repeatedly. And you don't want to do a training that if someone's sick or you hire someone tomorrow, they miss out on everything important, right? So there's scalable ways at reasonable costs to start creating that foundation of what our managers need to know and capturing it so each manager is required to go kind of go through those things.
Love it. And I think one of the scalable ways that I've seen, again, people like to, I'm going to spend the next 90 days planning this program and every module. And again, not that's wrong necessarily, but normally that's a whole lot of work.
Oh,
It doesn't always go somewhere. So I like making it scalable and taking a little bit more of an agile, iterative approach
great.
of let's teach people how to assess talent
Yep.
and coach talent and develop. Okay, now let's teach them how to have difficult conversations. And it doesn't have to be we're sending them away for 2 weeks.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hey, this month we're giving our leaders this new technique that they can use.
Exactly.
And next month we'll give them something else.
Exactly. Even my curriculum I do for recently promoted people, I didn't disappear in a bubble for 90 days and scope it. It's just through, oh, they need this type of training. They need this type and ad hoc. Let's build this skill over the 20 years I've been doing this. And then it turned into, okay, this is the foundation that leaders need. And then you modify as the business changes, et cetera.
Coming back around to the hiring, the sourcing, evaluation, hiring of new folks. One of the things I want to make sure we cover, we talked about job scorecard,
Mhm.
which is important both for the hiring and the retention and creating the right environment. But assuming you've got a job scorecard, now it's time to interview
Mhm.
candidates.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about, because this is another thing I see people screw up way more often than
Okay.
not. Talk a little bit about the importance of a structured interview process and what the pieces of that process might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Structured interview process vitally important. And the first thing that goes out the door and people are busy, right? So, structured interview process, first of all, taking a step back. So, you have a scorecard, and the purpose of every interview for every single person that's involved in the interviews is to be able to take what they've learned about the individual and translate it into a scorecard. So, as you're doing a structured interview process, every single person who's an interviewer in the process is going to score the individual with data based on what they've seen the individual has done onto the scorecard. When I say what they've seen the individual has done, top grading is based in a foundational principle that behaviors repeat themselves. So, behaviors that people have had in their last roles is going to be how they show up in your role. So, interviewing is not about saying, hey, what would you do if a client called you and said they were mad? Instead, it's about saying, okay, tell me a time at this position. Tell me about your most difficult client. Great. Tell me what were they most mad about? Now, what were the steps you took to resolve it and how did that turn out? And getting specifics of their background to understand exactly what they've done, not what they're promised they're going to do if given the situation. Because everyone knows the right candidate. So they can promise all day long what they should do, but you want to really dig into what they've done. So that's really the top rating principle. And then breaking it apart into a structured interview. You're going to have your preliminary phone screen. I call it the "Are You Crazy" test, right? They seem like they might be a good fit. They're in the salary range. Then you want to do a chronological interview. This is the top grading interview where you go back to high school and you work your way forward, understanding every single piece of their career. What was the successes? What were their failures? What are they most proud of? Who was their boss? What's the boss going to say their strengths were? What's the boss going to say their weaknesses were? And not only what's your boss gonna say, but when I call that person, what's their name? What are they gonna tell me? In top rating, we call that the truth serum, right? They're gonna all of a sudden get very real if you're threatening that you're gonna talk to their old boss. Why did you leave the position? How did your manager take it when you left the position? Going position to position, following that type of methodology really peels back the onion of an individual. You're gonna start finding the patterns of behavior that keeps repeating. I took on a leadership role instantly. Every project I touched was successful, continues their career. I did not get along with my coworkers. My manager had unrealistic expectations of me. He and I butt heads. So we finally jointly agreed that I'd part, proceed to their careers well. You're just trying to get a really big picture of the patterns of behavior that they're going to bring to your job that you can translate into the scorecard. That's a chronological interview. Then the next round is typically when you're getting into managers, technical skill set, maybe an executive level interview. And this is a behavioral interview where they're going to get really pinpointed into what it is that they need to show up in that job, whether it's finance, whether it's operations. But again, digging into competencies and the ability to hit your KPIs on what they've done. Have they managed talent density before? If so, what was the talent density of the organization? If they had a negative talent density, if they had high C performers, they're obviously not great at moving C performers out of the organization, right? Really getting specific into that role. So that is the steps they should take. And I'm forgetting a vital step: reference checks. Reference checks are that final step to make sure everything they're saying is true and to fill any hole in your scorecard. And then every person that interviews scores them based on the data they see. And then we come together and we talk about our scores, because I'm going to see something different potentially than you saw at a different interview, because every time we meet with them, they're becoming more comfortable and they're becoming a little looser in what they're saying. So you're really starting to get to the truth of who they are and peeling back that onion.
What I love about this structure is that different interviewers, depending on whether it's the behavioral interview or the top grading, details of their job history interview or the reference check. And some of my clients have a core values interview. They make
Yes.
part of it that, so,
Mhm.
so you could vary it. But what I love about the different types is that everybody interviewing has a different role.
Exactly.
Because one of the things I ask, and I was just doing a workshop for a group of CEOs yesterday, and I said, how many of you have multiple people interviewing someone before you bring them on? And about
No.
half the group very proudly raised their hand. Yes, we have multiple interviews. But I said, that's great. But most of you are pissing off your job candidates because all two of you or three of you or four of you are asking the same damn questions.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I mean, do you see that as well? If it's not structured?
100%. So you have to be structured. And then even if you're splitting up a behavioral interview, you don't want to be focusing on the same behaviors, right? So with one of your clients, we would always get together ahead of time and say, these three competencies you're responsible for digging into. These three competencies you're responsible for digging into. And we tell them it's a 30-minute get to know you interview with the different executives on the team, but really they're diving into different areas of this individual's behaviors in life so that we can come together with a full picture. You've got to be structured. You've got to have that clarity ahead of time. Also, two big issues I run into on a repeated basis that is worth noting. Same interviewers every time for that position. So many times, I'm busy, you do this one, and then I'll do this one, and then you do this one. That's not consistent. We then don't have a very clear, how do we compare people? You have to do the same interviewers for that open position. And you have to be willing to dedicate the time to an interview, especially as people are interviewing with senior executives. I'm seeing today people say, I only have 20 minutes. I'll get in there. I'll talk to them. I'll see how I feel. How can we hire a C-level person on a 20-minute interview? They need to dedicate at least an hour. And if they're doing an in-depth chronological interview, it's 3 hours. But they have to give the time to find the data. This is a vital addition to their family and their organization. We can't rush it. You wouldn't. I always say to clients, like, you're not going to get married after meeting a person for 5 minutes. The same with hiring someone, but sometimes costs more. And so we want to take the time. Don't do a quick drive-by interview. You got to come in fully present, ready to make the time to that interview.
And what message does that send the job candidate
Exactly.
when you're like, oh,
Exactly.
I've got 20 minutes to
I've
talk
got
to
20
you?
minutes. What are you going to tell me? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And you touched on something, and I want to drill a little deeper on the reference check, because
Yeah.
the reference check is one of those things that a lot of companies don't do because it's not adding any value. That, the companies that do it because they know they're supposed to, but of course, folks are going to give you people that are going to say nice things. And of course, the lawyers tell people all you need,
Don't do it.
all you could do is say they worked here from these dates. This was their title, name, rank, and serial number. So I know top grading has got this truth serum, you called it, this idea of threat of a reference check.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit more about how reference checking can be more valuable. How do you change that process so it's truly a valuable piece of the puzzle?
So it's really important to recognize that every step of the reference check, you're getting information on the individual. So it starts before you even pick up the phone to call the references. I'm going to talk to your supervisors. Can you give me those names? A performers will say, absolutely. Here's every boss I've ever had, and they're standing by the phone ready to talk to you. C performers will hesitate. I can't give you my last few. They're not available. The company has a policy. Let me tell you, if the company has a policy and you're a top performer, the manager is getting on the phone to talk about you. So it starts with, are you able to get a good supervisor reference? It has to be supervisor. And then if they're a manager, you should also talk to someone that they've managed, because you're going to get a lot of insight there as well. So it starts with, can you actually get the names? And can you get a callback from those names? Because again, if they're a top performer, their old manager is going to move mountains to call you back and is going to talk your ear off on how amazing they are. So that's the foundation. And then when you get on the call, you've got to know what you're digging into. Are there holes in the scorecards that you want to get answers to? This person interviewed them and thinks they're great at leadership. This person's interviewed them and sees some flags. Let's talk to the reference about that. You're going to do the standard. What was your relationship? Would you hire them again? What were they great at? What weren't they great at? But that's just a foundation. This is a springboard into the secret sauce of how are they going to show up at work. And you can really dig in and say, listen, I'm going to be their manager. What can you tell me about their ability to be a leader? What have they done there? Going to the next piece, though HR is typically very capable and better at peeling back the onion, sometimes there's a lot of value in the manager making the phone call, especially if it's a C-level and a CEO calls another CEO. If you're the CEO and you call another CEO and say, listen, I'm about to hire this person. What can you tell me? You're going to find out a lot more CEO to CEO than the HR person's ever going to find out. So when we get to those types of levels where, the CEO is going to be a manager, I always prepare the CEO on what to dig for, but ask them to do that call, because that CEO is going to talk to them for 20, 25 minutes. And then I always say the last question to ask is, great, when I hire them, I'm going to be their manager. What advice do you have for me? What should I know to make sure they can succeed? A lot is going to come out, good and bad. They really need to be handheld. They excel in micromanagement. So if you can create that environment, that's great. They're autonomous. They just want to know where to go, and you can get out of their way. So you've got to create that structure for them. You're going to learn a lot about that individual just with that question.
I love that. And you'll learn if you've heard all great things, you'll learn how to lead them and coach
Yeah,
them and manage them. Or you may hear something that's kind of an, oh shit, that could be a problem. So I
absolutely.
love that. And it's funny, years ago, the first time I recommended this method to a client, they came back and they had done like 15 phone screens, and they had talked about the idea on the phone screen that, hey, I'm going to be talking to these folks. So we did 50. Mike, it didn't work. You told us the technique, it didn't work. I said, what do you mean it didn't work? He said, we did 15 phone screens, and then all of a sudden, 10 out of the 15, we never heard from again. And I said, it worked.
It works.
What? Because
It
that
worked.
scares the crap out of people. It
It
doesn't
worked.
scare A players.
Nope.
It scares the mediocre performers and the underperformers. And yeah, why waste your time having more
Yeah.
conversations with them? So I absolutely love that methodology to manage all this, to most effectively increase talent density, to doing all those things. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of having a talent leader
Mhm.
around the leadership table. And I know you
Oh,
and I have specifically worked together with some of my clients to make that happen. And start off with the term human resources,
yeah.
which I absolutely hate.
I
And I
just
think it's the reason why the head of talent is typically not sitting around the leadership
Yep.
table, because people still call it human resources, and that's benefits and payroll and,
Administration,
and the
legal
administrative
compliance.
stuff. And yeah, very often that reports up through the CFO or
Mhm.
whatever. That's great. Talk a little bit about the importance of having a head of talent, or whatever the right name for it is. Why is it important, or is it important to have that around that leadership table?
Absolutely. It's funny you talk about human resources. The CEO I worked for is the vice president of leadership development. He used to always say HR is a dirty word. And that's how a lot of CEOs feel, right? HR is gonna tell me I'm doing something wrong, that we're out of compliance, and there is definitely a need for that.
Here's why we can't fire somebody.
Exactly. Exactly. So why you need a head of talent at the strategy table, and you need a head of talent at the strategy table, people are your number one resource. There has to be a long-term vision and strategy on how to bring in people, how to grow your people, and how to help your people execute. And that strategy has to be built into the company strategy, and they go hand in hand. The more you can have the person responsible for people sitting at the strategy table, they can help you create what's the right strategy with the talent pool we have today. Or say, hey, this strategy doesn't match the talent pool we have today. So now I know we need to create this strategy to drive us there. For so long in organizations, people have not been thought of as a strategy. That's something that you need to have vision for, have long-term objectives for, and have it intertwined in the company strategy. It's we're going to start a strategy and then we're just going to beat our people to do it and expect them to do it and make it do it. But it's a symbiotic relationship. You have to be thinking about people. Are they equipped? Do we have the right people? Do they know the strategy when you're creating the company strategy, and have them all intertwined together?
I love that. And when we think about kind of the accountabilities, that head of talent versus members of the leadership team, talk a little bit. I had members of the leadership team kind of say, oh, who don't have a head of talent, but they're
Yeah.
working on it. They're trying to find somebody. They sometimes they go overboard and they're like, "Oh, so, I don't have to worry about hiring people anymore. They're gonna do it. Or I don't have to worry about coaching my people, or we don't have to talk about how we're coaching our people. Let's wait until we bring that VP of talent on board because that person is gonna coach our people." I mean,
Right.
talk a little bit about the interplay between the leaders and the managers and what their accountability is versus the accountability of a head of talent and a head of talent's organization.
So to make it really black and white, every manager needs to have on their scorecard talent density. They're accountable to growing their team and removing underperformers, and they have to have employee NPS of their team. They're accountable for creating an engaging workforce that employees are happy and satisfied and excited to show up. So they hold the accountability toward their team. The head of talent helps drive strategy. They teach the leaders how to do it. They set the long term strategy. They hold people accountable to the long term strategy. They're not going to be the ones that come in and teach your individual how to be amazing at Excel, but they're going to tell you this individual at this seat, let's work on what their scorecard can look like. And here's the gaps that scorecard that you need to help. And I can be a resource to help figure out how to talent plan and what kind of training resources to bring into. But the accountability falls at the manager, falls at the executives. They have to be accountable to growing their team. The how to talent is their roadmap of what is the strategy and how to get there, and their incredible resource to drive it.
And setting standards for here's
Setting the
how we're gonna
standards,
hire
right?
people.
These are
Here's
the
how we're gonna
scorecards. This is the performance rhythm, right? It's in my world, it's the monthly performance rhythm, but this is the performance. These are the type of trainings your people should get. Here's a resource for the trainings, right? Setting the standards for the team.
the last topic I wanna hit before we wrap up is onboarding, which is typically, I hope you get your computer on time. It used to be here's where you're sitting.
Right.
Now you're typically sitting in your house,
Yeah.
but, do you have your laptop? Do you have your employee handbook? Like, it's the very tactical piece, and
Yeah.
most companies screw that up. I had a head of talent come into an organization and didn't have her laptop for 3 days. So even that tactical stuff, companies screw up. But talk a little bit about some of the important pieces of whether it's onboarding someone onto the executive team or any team. What are some of the important things people ought to think about when they've made the decision, they put the offer out, someone accepts the offer, now they're starting work. What are some of the key things to think about on the onboarding process?
Yeah. So, first of all, onboarding needs to be a part of the strategic roadmap of an employee's experience in the company, right? What's their experience before they are hired, in their first 90 days, as an employee, as a manager? And the head of talent should create a strategy on what is the employee experience. And onboarding is not an Excel sheet checklist of they've got their email, they've got their handbook, they signed their contract, they enrolled in benefits. This is where you sit. Onboarding is about what is the experience they need to have on the first day, the first week, the first month? Who do they need to interact with? What DNA of our company do we need to make sure they understand so they can live our core values from day one? What is the vision they need to see? So a good onboarding has a great first day where they're meeting with their manager, they've done all their logistical stuff, they're meeting with their team. Within the first week, they learn the core values of the organization. They learn the strategic direction of the organization. Within the first 2 weeks, they see their scorecard and they see this is how success is measured in your role. And by the way, when we were interviewing you, we saw you were phenomenal at these things. That's why we wanted to interview. That's why we wanted to hire you. Also, when we're interviewing you, we saw that there's a chance that we can really coach and develop you to improve in this area. So let's start a 90-day plan now to help you get there. They need to see here's how you're going to learn what it is you need to learn. And here are the milestones that we want you to hit. You're going to know how to use this software by the end of this week. You're going to be able to, do this task by the end of that week. They need a really clear vision of what are their expectations and what being at this company looks like and feels like.
And again, that takes time. And
It
people,
takes
oh, I'm,
time and
I'm
it takes
really busy.
leadership. And the head of talent is the quarter, or someone on HR is the quarterback. They need to be the one saying, okay, don't forget, this is everything the person needs to be involved with. Let's make sure these people are here in the right place to make that happen.
Beautiful. How do you help your clients? So tell us a little bit about the work you do. If someone's thinking, hey, that was great stuff, could Elizabeth help me? What does it look like when you go into a client and work with them?
Absolutely. So I go in to help with employee performance at every level. So from that foundation, I help build the scorecards. I help interview people to make sure they match the scorecards externally or internally. Sometimes I brought in with, we've got this person, we want to make them COO. Can you interview them to the scorecard that you made and tell us this is the right person? Again, I come from I'm top grading certified. I've spent a lot of time doing those interviews to identify, what's great and what's not great. So that's the foundation. I help drive employee engagement. What's your workforce look like? What are the opportunities? What can we do to set the strategy to do that? I help put performance plans into place. I help with management training. Again, like I said, mid-level managers promoted, surprise, good luck. I come in and help fill those goals or fill those holes so they can achieve. The way I really like to work is come in and create a strategic roadmap. Where's your company today with people and where should it be to be a great workplace? And then here's all the things that you should do in this order to drive to a fantastic place to work. And then I can help with elements of that. I can help them hire with elements of that. I can run the whole thing for them.
Beautiful. And in a minute, I'll ask you to share where people can find
Yeah.
more about you. But before I do, critical question. And I don't want to get you in trouble if you've got relationships with the top grading folks, but 2 books on this top grading methodology that we should read, or one of 2 we should recommend people read. There's Top Grading,
Uh-huh.
3rd edition, and then there's Who, the
Yep.
A Method for Hiring. I know which one I always recommend,
Two.
but I want to know which one you recommend.
I recommend Who to every manager and every executive. I recommend Top Grading to anyone in HR and recruiting.
Why do you make that distinction?
Top Grading is an encyclopedia, I always say, to how to do it. And it's an overwhelming thing to a regular manager. So, what they need to know to grow their people, to use data driven decisions in hiring, to utilize scorecards, they can get from who was the Cliff Notes to Top Grading? It was written by Brand Smart's son, and it's the Cliff Notes to Top Grading, right? So, I let the managers and the executive team get away with the Cliff Notes, but I want HR and recruiting to focus on the full book.
Beautiful. I love that. So you just helped me because I normally just recommend Who, the A
Mhm.
Method for Hiring. And by the way, Jeffrey Smart is the author
I,
of
s-
Who that, no, I think you got
oh,
it right.
okay.
Jeffrey
Yeah.
Smart is the author of Who, and Top Grading is Brad
It's
Smart,
Brad Smart.
his
Right.
father.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. Top Grading, I've read both.
Yeah.
Top Grading is a slog to get through, and Who is a great read. So I've been recommending Who,
Yep.
but I love your idea. I think moving forward, I'm going to say, all right, everybody read Who, except head of talent, or God forbid they call them head of HR. They've got to read Top Grading. I love
Yeah,
that.
and Top Grading has, like, templates and all these things you can use, so it's great for HR or head of talent or recruiting to use. This is their encyclopedia on how to succeed, so they definitely should use that.
And if folks want to go beyond just reading the book, they could certainly work with you. And I
Mhm.
think on the Top Grading
They
website, at
have
least, that they have workshops and
they have
certifications. And
phenomenal workshops, phenomenal certifications. I recommend to any human resource person who wants to do more to go get that certification, 100%.
beautiful. So, Elizabeth, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Engagedleadershipconsulting.com.
Beautiful. Love it. This was great. A lot of great information. Elizabeth, thanks so much for doing the show.
It was a pleasure. It was so much fun. Thank you.
Thanks.